after lunch or something. Got a lot of information this morning. We're going to continue to drive through some, and I've got my friend Jim Cowart, and want to talk to you about, okay, we've talked about launch strategy, we talked about all these steps, we talked about marketing, we've talked about the essentials, the toolbox, and I want to come to, okay, beyond launch, now what? How do you grow a healthy church? What does that look like? What are some real practical nuts and bolts of that? And I'm excited to be here with Jim Cowart, and I just wanted to give a chance to breathe a little bit, because we've all come from all different backgrounds, all different types of churches, and met along the journey. So, but Jim, I want you to unpack a little bit about Harvest Church, where you guys are, how you got started.
Harvest is a United Methodist Church in Warner Robins, Georgia, pretty much middle Georgia, not a very big town, about 50,000, 150,000 in the county. And in 1999, I started having this thing within me, holy discontent, something. I wasn't seeing adults come to know Christ. And shared this story before, and I'm a South Georgia boy, so my prayers are not fancy, but it went kind of like this. Dadgummit, Jesus, I want to see somebody won for Christ too in my ministry. You know, I was reading about this and hearing about this. Went out to Saddleback and saw it's kind of a whole new way of doing church, and it was just a whole cool model. Then Jennifer and I went out to Saddleback for this training. It was a week long then, and we've kind of condensed it. But we got that training, we came back to Georgia, and people really didn't know what to do with us in our denomination at the time. They'd kind of gotten out of the habit of starting churches, so they were kind of saying, go ahead and try it. We don't really know what you're talking about. Go ahead and give it a shot. So they gave us some money, we started, but we didn't have land, we didn't have building, and we really didn't have a launch team yet. We had to gather our launch team during the preview services because we didn't know anybody from the area. But man, it was just, being on stage with Ron is so cool because he's one of my heroes, and just you guys saved us so many mistakes. We made our own mistakes, of course, I mean, doing stuff. But we started, we had our preview services, we had 5, in 2000, and then launched our first service in February of 2001. And we went from just Jen and I and our kids, and it's really grown. The coolest stat is we're 10 years old. We're 10 years old this week. I think Jennifer said, is it 1,800 people that we've seen accept Christ at Harvest? We've been able to follow up with them, get them incorporated into the church and stuff like that. So just seeing the life change is so humbling, because Jesus lets us partner. It's His church, it's His mission, it's His everything, but to let us do it with Him is just such a privilege.
And awesome. You know, as you said that about Jen, I looked out there, I said, those are 2 good-looking ladies sitting back there in the back, aren't they, right?
And mighty fine.
We probably ought to ask them out afterwards. That's my wife, Teddy Renee, and Jim's wife, Jennifer.
That's right.
So, good to see you guys. That's...
I think we said this about
I just kind of got derailed, man.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Come back. How important it is for your spouse to be on board. And it doesn't have to be like on staff. You know, Teddy's been on staff, Jennifer's on staff. That's not the on board that necessarily talking about. But I remember when we were out at Saddleback, we were staying, and we went for a walk because the sessions were long, and it was just like drinking out of a fire hydrant and all this kind of stuff. And we were walking along Laguna Beach. And I really hadn't been pressing Jen on it, because the one thing I had really heard that made sense was, if your spouse is not on board, it could be a timing thing, it could be, you know, you're just not supposed to do this or whatever. And I could go back today and kind of tell you where we were on the beach, show you, and where Jennifer said, I'm in. And for me, that was just this big affirmation. Let's do this together. Now, she was scared. She was like, you know, You're telling me we're leaving good jobs with salaries to go somewhere where nobody's really asking us to start a church nobody's begging for. Doesn't sound like a great idea to me, but she was on board, and she was
it's
just
critical.
So valuable.
I mean, it is. It's critical. If you know, you and I, we've met with so many church planners. I remember when I looked at Teddy and I said, I really feel like God's calling us to start a church, and I think we need to empty our retirement and start. And I don't know anything about this, and I don't know where we're going to do or what we're going to do it. And when she looked at me and said, let's go. You know, there's something about having a partner, a soulmate that believes in you, that says, you know what, you're following Christ and I'm following you. and I'm with you. And that's the difference, because we've all sat, I remember sitting in my office with a church planner and his wife, and I said, man, tell me what you're going to do. And he's sitting there and he's all excited. He said, this is the vision, this is what it looks like, this is what we're going to have, and we're going to do this, we're going to reach these people, and he's just so excited. And his wife was sitting next to him on the sofa, and I promise you, this is what she was doing. And I stopped him and I said, hey, hang on just a second. Just stop. And I looked at her, I said, you pretty excited about this? And she said, I mean, it's his job, I don't care. And that's when I looked at him and I said, don't do this. God's not saying no, but he's definitely saying not yet. Don't do this. And he said, but I have to. I have to. And I said, I'm telling you, if she's not on board, don't do this. And it didn't end well.
It's hard. And this thing, starting a church, you've called it the X Games of church planning. You've called it the SEALs, all this. Yeah. And it's better with a team. We'll talk about this, but the days of an isolated pastor doing one, carrying the whole load, we see it bottlenecks very quickly, and there's a huge stress load. We need a team.
Yep, and growing beyond. I mean, the launch, you got to build your team, but growing beyond, what happens now? You got a church. Right. It's kind of like Epcot. How many Floridians? We should have a lot of us. How many of y'all are Floridians now? Okay, anybody from Orlando area? All right. I grew up in Winter Park High School Wildcat, UCF. But I moved to Orlando in '71. And in '72, something came on the scene in Orlando that changed the whole face of Orlando. It's called Disney. Walt Disney World opened. So we got to see the explosion of a city. Walt Disney had a dream, not just for Walt Disney World, but he had a dream for a place called Epcot. And Disney's dream for Epcot was the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And his dream was, we want to build a place that people actually come and live in this community, and they can live a life that they cannot live anyplace else on earth. And it was this futuristic community. It was the best of the best. And that was his dream for Epcot, that it would be a place that people come and live a life in that community. How many of you have ever been to Epcot? Okay, did you see anybody living there? No. Nobody lives at Epcot, do they? Do you know why? Because when Disney died, all of the leaders behind him looked at it and said, it will cost too much to build a literal city. Let's just make it a showcase. And that's what we've done with the churches in America. Rather than create an actual community where people can experience life like they've never experienced anyplace else on earth, we have built showcases for the weekend. Because it's hard work. It's hard work to build this community. But as church planners, we get to do that. And and we're going to drive through. What does that mean? How do you build?
Well, as we get to the launch, one of the things I was thinking about, I wanted to remind these guys and tell them is you need to really start thinking systems. What we're going to be talking about is setting up the weekend experience. And really, the weekend is a group of systems. What I mean by that is you've got a worship system, you've got a greeting system, a hospitality system, a children's system. I think those are some of your most important for the weekend experience. But they all form together, and a system is something that it's tested when you're not there. What I mean by that, in the first years of Harvest, starting, I was there. I didn't feel like I could be gone at all, and in a way you couldn't, because it's like a little baby. Little babies need more attention. But we've, through the years, built systems so that when I step out of it, that the system carries on without me. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, if you're the only greeter, the greeting system is going to fall apart if you're sick. If you're the only speaker, the preaching system is going to fall apart if you're not there. So what you want to do is you want to build these systems. Good. And let me just say, take it one at a time. When you say that, you don't have to start off with everything at once, but you got to start off with the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, and the weekend, because it has to be about the weekend initially, because that's going to be the main drawing place for people coming. Now, what we have to do, though, it says there, we have to tenaciously work as church planners and pastors and leaders to build this environment that takes away barriers so that when people come in, and the first thing we have to do is think through the first impressions of guests. Think through the eyes of a guest walking in for the first time. Wherever you are, whether it's a portable church setup, whether it's going to be a conference center, whether it's an actual facility that you rent, wherever it is, you got to think through their eyes. What do they see? Because you get one shot to make a first impression. And I remember going out to buy in Ocala. I went to buy shoes one day, and in Ocala we don't have shoe stores. We have shoe departments. They're just not. You don't go buy a shoe at a shoe store. You go. So I went to the shoe department in some department stores, and I remember walking in and I had cash in hand because I blow out some shoes. I don't know what it is, but the front of my shoes blow out, and I have to go get new ones. The bottoms don't, but the fronts do. So I don't know. It's probably something I do weird when I walk. But anyhow, I'm going to get new shoes, and I got cash in hand and I'm ready to buy. I got to have it today. I walk into the shoe department. And I'm looking around, and I'm looking at the shoes that I like, and nobody talked to me. Now, it wasn't because they weren't there. They were there. They were working. Yeah. They were there. They were talking. They were just talking to themselves with, fellow employees talking. There was somebody in there talking on the phone. I walked through. I'm looking. I'm trying, this is kind of one. I'm thinking, I was there for 15 minutes, and nobody talked to me. And I went, really?
This is like church.
That's right. And I walked out. Yeah. It is, and I went to another shoe store, and the same deal. I tried on a pair of shoes there. It's just because I took them off the rack, and they happened to be my size, and I slipped my foot in them. But nobody spoke to me. I left, and I bought my shoes online because it's exactly what it is. That's what happens to people in churches all across America every weekend. You come in and you ignore them, and you got to think through that. What does it look like? When they walk in the door. Yeah. How do you build that system?
Well, when you're in your preview system, in your preview services, it's a great time to visit other churches, and especially churches that you want to be like.
That's good.
You could spend your time going to your buddy's church or whatever, but go somewhere like the Springs. Go somewhere, visit where you're going to be. When Jennifer and I were in the previews, we had the one service a month, and then we were able to travel around, and we really saw this. No joke, we went to some churches and nobody spoke to us. And they were talking about us because we could see their heads turn and say, look at that. I bet they got children. I bet maybe we could get them to work in the nursery. Or, they were looking us up and down, but nobody really spoke to us. But we went to this one church in Columbus, and good gracious, it was like 30 or so people spoke to us, and it was unprompted. You could tell it was the DNA. One of the primary tasks of the leader, I think, is doing what we're talking about, is setting the environment, is creating a tone. Every place has one. Have you ever been to some store in the mall or something, and you get this creepy vibe? It's a weird, and it just kind of almost...
Spencer's Gifts?
Yeah. Or so,
all the time, man. Creepy vibe. Every time I walk
just when you walk by. Well, leaders are like a thermostat. And thermostats set the temperature. Now, you can overdo it. In one of our first preview services, I was talking about this with my parking team, and I was telling them about it. I said, listen, we got to be friendly. People are scared when they come. We got to welcome people. I looked up. I was doing something else, and I see one of my greeters. A car is pulling into the parking lot of the school where we were meeting. And my greeters start running toward the car. The car, no joke, slows down, turns around, and kind of like almost peels out. You can see, hi, we're from Harvey. They're like chasing them down. It's like, okay, we got to back off a little bit. Don't hug everybody when they come in the door. Don't kiss them on the cheek. That's weird. But be friendly.